Climate Perspectives Project. This is our initial webinar for presenting the preliminary findings of the project. We have about 50 people attending right now. There may be some more joining us later. My name is Stephanie Hobbs. I'm the Executive Director of Simcoe Muskoka Literacy Network. We have with us also Sherry Menard, is also with the network, and she's providing some technical support for us. Gay Douglas is our presenter, and she'll be talking to you shortly. And we also have Deb Flynn from Quill Networks also doing some technical stuff for us. The webinar will be approximately 45 minutes to an hour. The webinar is being recorded, and we will eventually post the recording probably on our website. You're all muted at the moment, and that will remain during the presentation. If you are familiar with GoToWebinar, you'll see your dashboard down the right-hand side of your screen. There is an opportunity there for you to type in questions, and a few times during the presentation we'll stop and take a look at those questions, and Gay will answer questions if she can. And there's a chat function if you want to make some comments, but mostly we'll be monitoring the questions. And at the end of the presentation, we'll unmute you if you put your hand up, and we'll do a live question and answers at the end. We keep the attendees for this webinar muted simply so that it doesn't interrupt the flow of the presentation. But we will be addressing the questions and answers that you type in. Does anyone have any questions at the moment? Is everyone able to hear me? And you can, there's a little hand there, you can put your hand up if you cannot hear me. And everybody seems to be good. So I'm now going to turn this over to Gay Douglas to start the presentation. Go ahead, Gay.
Thanks very much, Stephanie, and I hope everyone can hear me clearly. My name is Gay Douglas, and it's been my pleasure to serve as a consultant on this project with Simcoe Muskoka Learning Network. And we are actually operating in different cities across the province of Ontario, so I'm sure that we have the technology all figured out and everything will go smoothly. First slide, please. Okay, back one, please. Okay, today's agenda. Let me just walk us through what we're going to be covering today. I've broken this presentation, I think there's about 20 slides, maybe 22 slides, and I've broken them into 3 sections, and at the end of each section we're going to pause for the questions. The first section is going to be the overview, where I'm going to give you some background, a little more about the purpose of the project and the process that we used to get the results that we have. We're going to cover then the key, and then we'll have a question and answer. Then we're going to cover key findings, and you're going to hear about what the clients that we interviewed had to say about their experience of transition and what matters to them. So we're going to hear from the client's point of view. Then we're going to have question and answer period. After that, we will move on to next steps, and we'll let you know about what else is planned in this project until it wraps up at the end of March. So that is our process for the day. So let's start with the project overview. And this project is actually the second in a series of formalizing transitions between ES and LBS. That particular project was undertaken last year with the Simcoe Muskoka Literacy Network, and it looked at the point of view of programs and practitioners. For many years, literacy and basic skills programs and employment services had organically grown to create their own ways of connecting. So this particular project took a look at what was working in communities across the province of Ontario and shared tools that were available as part of a guide in terms of how to formalize those transitions. A little later on, I will be sharing the link to that document, which is still on the Simcoe Muskoka network site. So after Simcoe Muskoka heard what programs and practitioners had to say about the transition process, they thought it might be a good idea to listen to the client's point of view. So that's what this project was all about. The partners on the project were the Simcoe Muskoka Literacy Network and the Metro Toronto Movement for Literacy, which is the regional literacy network in Toronto. And we were looking at the transition and referrals between Employment Ontario programs. So from a client's point of view, what worked for them throughout their transition process? What barriers did they encounter? What solutions would they have? So what can we learn from their experience that will transfer to our programs across the province? I must say this has been an extremely interesting project to work on. I think that hearing from the client's point of view is always so remarkable and so interesting to hear the points of view. When we get on a little further, I will tell you about some of the similarities and some of the differences between the groups that we spoke to in the individual students. And so we did 9 focus groups, some with LBS, some with LBS and ES mix, some with specifically just LBS. The original project proposal called for 8 focus groups, but we had a very strong response from the deaf community toward the end of our deadline, and so we decided to add in a 3rd deaf group. All of these, maybe the next slide will explain, excuse me, a little more about the focus groups. We completed these focus groups over the course of 3 weeks in November. We had a total of 80 participants, and when we had asked our focus group sites to set aside a room that was conducive to good conversation, we said it would likely be about an hour long, but in every case the conversation got started and, at least for the conversation to take place. Simcoe Muskoka was able to offer a subsidy for travel and dependent care to also encourage people to participate in this process. Here's a profile of the folks that we spoke to. First of all, the criteria for participants was that this particular client needed to be referred to the program where they were currently working through an Employment Ontario provider, through a referral of some kind. In addition, we would also like to talk to people who had been referred from the program they were currently in to perhaps some other wraparound service. So let's take an example of an LBS learner who, through his interaction with his LBS staff, had been referred to perhaps a mental health service. So they could also draw on their experience of being referred to a non-Employment Ontario provider. We thought that we had a lot to learn from providers and services outside of the Employment Ontario network, but our real focus was that within Employment Ontario, the transitions within Employment Ontario. And I also wanted to flag the fact that I'm going to go back and forth in talking about clients and learners in this. When I speak about clients, they may have been clients in terms of the employment services language, or they may have been learners in terms of an LBS client. But if you hear me say client, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are only a client of an employment service. So here are the profiles of the focus groups that we met. Francophone, 2 Francophone. We worked with a Francophone person who actually facilitated the process for us, which I believe really helped in terms of the communication flow. We met with one that was an urban location in downtown Toronto and another one that was a rural location. We met with 3 deaf programs. One was very urban in a college setting, a school board setting, and a deaf service organization. All of those were urban. In an Anglophone setting, we met with college, 2 community-based, and an employment services provider. Goals, very interesting. The goals of the people who came forward, one of our first questions, and you'll see that shortly, was, what are your specific goals? Do you have employment goals, and what are they specifically? We found that most had set goals for themselves that were post-secondary goals or jobs that would require post-secondary training. That was an interesting finding. Ages varied from very, very young people in their teens right up to a number of people who had a very strong connection with the workforce and had found themselves laid off in their 40s and 50s and were dealing with the grief of that particular process. So we had a very wide variety of ages. Here is a list of the focus group sites that were kind enough to host us and to look after all the details of the focus group for us. So all we had to do was arrive and we were ready to go. So they looked after registration, they looked after the facilities management for us. So as you can see, the two Francophone agencies are at the top, followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4 Anglophone programs we met with, and finally we have the Barrie Career Center, which was an employment services program, and Frontier College, which was community-based. Okay, here we are at the questions. We've had a very active advisory group on this project through Simple Muskoka Network. And working with our advisory group, we came up with these questions for the focus groups. So I will just read them. What job would you like to have at the end of your upgrading or training? How did you find this program? What other programs are you currently using? What do these services do for you? How do they help you reach your goals? What was your transition experience like? What did this program do to make the transition experience smooth? What could be better? And then we, of course, allowed for other comments and other information that they wanted to share. Focus group setting. For many of you who have conducted focus groups with students in the past, you know how important it is to just have an informal conversation, to put any concerns aside around anonymity, confidentiality, to make people feel safe so that you actually hear what their experience has been. With each focus group, we brought in coffee and refreshments and really tried to set a tone so that the clients that we spoke with would be open and comfortable. And very interesting. The level of emotion with many of the clients that we met ranged from great excitement about the opportunities that were awaiting them to extreme frustration with some of the barriers that they had encountered, to a great deal of grief and loss, especially for the folks who had been recently laid off. In one particular group, there were 3 people who all had at least 20 years of experience in the same job, in the same industry, and had recently been laid off. So we did have to deal with some a variety of emotions that were related to their experience of transition. But, and with any group, you may come in with a set of questions that you intend to ask, but you do need to change or modify those questions somewhat based on your audience and how comfortable they are answering them. Also, we've certainly found over the years that when we're asking questions of clients, sometimes they give you the answer you didn't expect, or they actually give you the answer to question number 4 when you're only on question number 2. So coming back to the office and sitting and going through all of the answers and putting them in the right categories was quite an undertaking. But I think we have a really strong sense of what the clients wanted us to know. Okay, at this point, I'm going to pause briefly and see if we have any questions.
I don't see any questions at the moment, Gay.
Okay, I will keep moving. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Phase 1 document. And you'll see at the bottom of this page a link to where it is located at the Simcoe Muskoka website, Simcoe Muskoka Literacy Network website. So you can go there and use these materials. There is a wealth of materials there. The word transition, I thought I would take a moment and look up the word transition because I'm sure it has many different meanings to many different people. The one I really like is the definition that it is the process or period of changing from one state to another. So we were really trying to capture that process of being between programs or arriving at a program or preparing to move to a program. So to get back to the Phase 1 report, it looked at transition points from a program point of view and factors that influence transition readiness. If you go to this particular document, you will see a summary of the tools, resources, workshops, and listings of emerging practices, and you'll see the list there of all the great things that are available. So I do encourage you to go to that guide and find this information if you believe it will be helpful. I wanted you to also know that there will be a guide coming out, which will be a revision of this first guide that will include the comments and the information provided to us from clients' point of view. Next. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. All righty, key findings. Here we are. Here's the meat of what we learned. First of all, referral sources. We learned quite a bit about where the clients had come from that we talked to in the focus groups. And yes, it will be 80 people, certainly not statistically viable to make any assumptions around the entire provincial picture, but interesting nonetheless. Here's some very important information about what matters to clients, and I'm going to list them here, but we have a separate slide for each of these, so I'll get into the information in a little more detail. What matters to clients are partnerships. What matters to clients is customer service, and we've included 3 different elements under customer service, which includes the environment at the agency that they are referred to, accommodations at the new program that they're attending, and type of service delivery that they experience in the early days with that new program. They also spoke to co-location, the importance of labor market information, and then I wanted to highlight some of the very specific findings we found around the cultural groups, both deaf and francophone. So the next slide will walk through each of these elements. Next slide, please. Okay, great. Here is a summary of where people were referred from to the program they are currently in. Primarily, employment services had been the referrer to the program these folks were in. Also, there was school board referrals. There were referrals from ODSP, college, Ontario Works, and specific agencies. This one in particular listed here is the Canadian Hearing Society. So a variety of direct referrals from other community agencies. Followed by word of mouth, 14 of them had come only because someone else had told them this was a great program to go to, and we did find that word of mouth was far more likely to happen in either a deaf or a francophone program. A smaller community, a tight community, people talk, people communicate, and tend to share information, and that was what we found. Number of people found the information via website, marketing, posters, and then a number of different ways of finding out. So there are some, in one community in particular I'm thinking of here, people simply said, well, everyone knows that this is the organization that helps people learn new things and get jobs. There's only one here in this town, so of course, where else would we go? So it really some major differences between rural and urban. Next. Okay, let's talk a bit about the importance of partnerships with students and clients. Many of them listed, many of the clients we met with listed the variety of services that were available in their current program and how valuable that was for them in terms of taking next steps, changing their goals, considering, for example, taking ACE because it was also offered at the same organization and they wouldn't have to leave. As we all know, transportation and simply transitioning from one program to another can often be problematic. So the fact that these programs were all available in one place meant an awful lot. For agencies that may not have other programs available on site, it was certainly important to them that they have speakers or tours. It was the first time I heard that suggested, was in Toronto that said, we know there's lots of other organizations out there that may be able to help us with our next step, but we're not certain if it's a good fit for us or what we could find out. So the idea of doing a client tour and perhaps putting some folks on a bus and driving around to some of the other community agencies was a suggestion that they had. So that's it for partnerships at this point. Okay, this is the big one, customer service, the environment. And they describe things like, I feel safe here, I feel relaxed here, I'm comfortable, staff are supportive, staff are professional, respectful, and personable. So many of them said that despite their anticipation and their fear of perhaps starting in this new program, the moment they met the staff and felt this very welcoming sense in the environment that they went to, that they felt that the transition would be completed, that they were not going to run either direction. The idea of a single point of contact is probably not a new idea. We all know if we're dealing with any service provider, it's much better if you can ask for Joe or ask for Harry and they know who you are. But that came out again and again, the single point of contact. So if someone is being referred to an agency, the importance that that person be the one that gets back to them, that that person provides them with the information they need prior to them starting with the program. We heard about the Denises and we heard about the Susans, the people who became that relevant, welcoming person that made them feel that the transition was a positive one. So the longer it takes to make an appointment with anyone, the chances are that they may disappear or they may not make that appointment. So timeliness was extremely important. Another thing that was, it's really important that I, as client, make that referral myself. That was a surprise to me. When we asked the question, is it better for you to call the agency that you're being referred to and make an appointment and go and see them, or would you like the agency you're being referred from to do that? Most folks said, no, that's my responsibility. I would rather handle that communication myself. My schedule changes, and because of that single point of contact, they would have then one person who they could communicate with. We heard terms like, these people take off the training wheels for me. They give me just enough support, but now I'm on my own. So I'm really feeling that I'm supported in this agency. The most common area of improvement was the idea of co-location. And we heard a lot about that. We can flag that actually as a best practice. And for locations that did have multiple service providers in the same location, the client said either weren't even aware that they had a transition, or the transition was so smooth that they would recommend it for others. Okay, I'm going to add one thing before we go on with the next slide, and that was another piece from the customer service piece that I think is worth repeating, and that is that the client-specific approach that our service providers use in terms of customized training plans and specific training and support that is offered to them as individuals was an extremely important piece of the transition being a successful one for them. They noted in many cases that customized approach and the focus of programming on self-awareness and understanding their own strengths and weaknesses was an important part of the process. So now we've dealt with the location. Let's move on to labor market information. Okay. In many cases, when we ask clients if they were clear on whether or not the career goal they had selected had good hiring opportunities in their community, they were not aware. In one case in particular, labor market information was provided, and the clients told us that as they were setting goals with their practitioners, local labor market was used to make some decisions about whether they would become a baker or whether they were going to become a heavy equipment operator. One particular group of young people talked about the importance of knowing about jobs outside of their community. This is a particular transient group. They're young people. They have the rest of their lives in front of them. And one gentleman in particular wanted to know about the, work opportunities in Alberta and other provinces. So while we typically think about labor market information as something that is local in terms of emerging and declining jobs, these folks were saying, no, we need a wide variety of information about the real chances of getting hired at the end of this process. So that was very informative. Okay, a note about our cultural communities and some of the challenges that they face. There was a number of different challenges. I'm just looking at my notes here. There's a lack of referrals in Francophone programs, often from employment services and others. For example, Ontario Works, in the forms that people fill out to register or apply for Ontario Works social assistance, there was nowhere on those forms for folks to self-identify as Francophone, and as a result they felt that the clients that we spoke to felt that they did not get always the referral that was most appropriate for them. Many employment services programs were challenged to be able to serve the clients who may speak French or may choose French as their primary language. And in many cases, the clients told us stories about being encouraged to use English only and not having Francophone resources available to them. There's also a lot of history in one particular community where there was some division between programs that were Francophone and programs that were Anglophone historically, and how that separates services from working together. In the deaf folks, the deaf clients that we spoke to some of the clients were deaf, some were deafened, and some were hard of hearing. So I now understand the differences and how different those needs may be for those three very distinct client groups. We heard a lot of stories about barriers around employment services being able to serve them effectively, about assumptions that if someone needs an interpreter to serve a deaf client, that they would go to a deaf service and somehow magically, without any cost, an interpreter would be made available, when in truth interpreters are costly, interpreters are extremely valuable, and interpreters need to be booked ahead. And so there's a lot of assumptions and misinformation across the service stream around the needs of deaf clients. We met with one client from the deaf stream who has already earned 3 college diplomas, but finds herself back again and again at the LBS program because no one will hire her. So there are barriers in job fairs for people with who may be deaf or deafened or hard of hearing. We heard about those barriers. We heard about the cost of equipment and how difficult it is for them alone to pay for these costs, and the different kinds of funding and the different kinds of rationale and criteria for getting the technical equipment that would help people not only learn but also find work. There's also a major problem in terms of transitioning from employment services to the world of work. When employers make assumptions that somehow, as long as they offered an interpreter for the first day or 2 on the job, that they would likely be okay after that. So I think that there's a great deal of information and misinformation out there about both of these cultural groups. So at this point, I will pause and ask if there are any questions.
We had one question, Gay, wanting to know when you were starting to talk about partnerships, what did the clients understand or mean when they talked about partnerships?
Oh, they understood that partnerships may be part of a co-location situation where, for example, I can get ACE as well as my LBS. And I'm going to be very specific here in one particular Francophone agency where Collège Boreal was also a very close partner who delivered on site. But they also understood it was about partnerships outside of Employment Ontario and in other locations. It was about knowing about these programs and being able to link with them to get more information or to visit or to have a tour. So I think they had a very broad understanding and a very good understanding of partnership.
Okay, I hope that answers the question. I don't see any other questions. Deb, did you see any other questions?
No, Stephanie, there's no more questions.
Okay, I have to explain to everybody that what we see on our dashboard is different from what the attendees are seeing. So we just want to make sure.
There is another question.
Okay.
Were there any major differences in client response in rural versus urban settings?
Good question. And this will be thoroughly described in webinar 2. That's a bit of a teaser for everyone. But transportation, where we might think in an urban center the idea of transportation is an issue, right? In a rural setting that may not have connections, a good interregional transportation, affordable, accessible transportation system, it's a real issue. And the reason I say this is that when we spoke to the urban folks and we questioned about transportation, even though it might take them half an hour, they didn't consider transportation a barrier. So that was probably the chief one. And because it probably isn't, because a large city like Toronto is resourced with subway systems and streetcars and a bus system, people were not nearly as concerned about getting from point A to point B as part of this transition. That was probably the biggest one, but there are a couple of others that I don't have in front of me right now. But tune in next time.
Gay, there's another question. Were expectations, timelines, example for ACE program, and readiness for college similar on all sides? They say clients, ES, LBS. So was that considered was it considered on all sides? Was it similar on all sides?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. Were expectations concerning timelines. Example, the expectations of the timelines for the ACE program or readiness for college. Similar on all sides, whether it's clients, ES, or LBS. Did everybody have the same idea that the timelines were the same?
We didn't talk much about timelines. We did have some concerns about second career. A number of the clients were also second career clients, and they had some concerns about the process of accessing second career funding and having a plan in place and getting through what they were doing in an LBS agency to be ready for the next step. There was some disconnect there, but I can't think of any other time issues.
Okay, and one more question. Did you call LMI or something else when speaking to people?
I
Did you
called it
call it
labor market.
Okay.
Yeah, we called it labor market information, but we also described what kind of information that was.
Excellent. Those are the only questions I have now.
Yeah, we didn't use any acronyms. We tried to use, clear speaking and clear language and explain things to folks. And we explained that from our point of view, labor market information included emerging and declining jobs, information online that may help them set goals. We showed some concrete examples during the session, so they were aware that what it meant.
Okay, I guess that's all the questions for now. I just wanted to let people know that from time to time there's a little bit of interruption or delay in Gay's speech, and I believe it has to do with a little bit of a slowing down of her internet from time to time. So unless someone loses the sound totally, it may come and go a little bit. It seems to be better right now. If someone does lose their sound totally, perhaps you could send a little chat message to the organizers, and then we can see if there's anything we can do. I guess we'll go back to Gay.
Okay, well, thanks for letting me know, Stephanie. Next steps. This is I think, very close to our final slide. We will be rewriting the guide for to practitioners and programs for the transition process. There will also be a final report that will put all of the findings together. A very interesting concept that Stephanie has come up with in Barrie on February the 5th is a town hall, which is going to be a gathering of all of her local service providers, both, I believe, Employment Ontario, across Employment Ontario, and some other community partners to hear these findings and to also provide us with more information. I think as we talk about what the findings have shown and what matters to clients, we're going to talk about some very concrete and practical ways that programs can put these things in place, and where they're unable to put these things in place, talk about perhaps the barriers provide what sorry, I know that I'm having some technical problems on this end, but at least it's late, and recommendations to TCU. And I'm going to remind you to complete the webinar evaluation.
Okay, thanks, Gay. So just to confirm that
Next slide.
The local town hall meeting is on. Okay, I'm just going to jump in here at Stephanie. Our tentative schedule is, as Gay said, was for March the 5th, I believe. For the final webinar, we'll be sending out some information about that a little bit closer to the date, and it will include some of the findings from the town hall meeting. So now we're going to ask you if you have any questions, if you could put up your hand, and we'll give you a mic to talk into directly.
Well,
I don't see any questions right now.
we must have answered them all during the presentation.
So
So-
the final webinar will be a longer
Gay
webinar.
and Stephanie.
Okay.
Okay, Gay and Stephanie. Sarah had a question. When's the day of the town hall?
Could you put the slide back, please, Sherry? We're having it February the 5th. It'll be here in Barrie. It'll be in the afternoon.
And your webinar is on March the 3rd, but that's to be confirmed.
Tentatively, yeah. We'll have to confirm that. And it'll be
Great.
probably a bit longer one, and maybe about 2 hours. We'll have everything in it, so we'll just sort of, we'll send out information through the support organizations and that, like we did for this one.
And
We'll
Stephanie,
we'll also be notifying, we'll put the notice up on our on our website.
and Stephanie, there's one more question as to the link to the report shown at the beginning.
And what's the question?
Could we go back to that slide? Yeah. You went by it. There.
Okay. And what about the link?
Somebody wanted the link to the report,
Oh, okay.
so they
Our
have it now.
website, okay, so there it is now, and or you can just go literacynetwork.ca, that's our website, and click on resources, and then the projects are all listed under the resources tab. And we actually still have some hard copies of the original guide to transitions. If anybody wants anything in hard copy, we can send it to them.
Well, I guess unless someone else has any final questions, I guess we should wrap up. And thanks for spending some time with us this afternoon.
And please do answer the evaluation survey at the end of, it'll come directly to you through email. Thanks very much, everybody, and we look forward to connecting with you later on in the life of the project. Sure.
Stop sharing the screen.